I, Robert Wade, swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Before we go any further, may I just check that you can hear me clearly?
I can, thank you.
Thank you. Would you give your full name, please?
Robert Ian Wade.
And you're here to give evidence about your son, Richard Wade, correct?
That is true.
And today you'll be giving evidence to this inquiry about when Richard first experienced mental ill health in 2007, the mental ill health he went on to experience in 2015, culminating in his admission at the Linden Centre in Chelmsford on Finchingfield Ward. Tragically also, his death shortly afterwards, and matters surrounding all of this, together with the recommendations you suggest the inquiry should consider making. Is that correct?
Yes.
Was Richard under the care of North Essex Partnership, University NHS Foundation Trust, or NEP, whilst a patient at the Linden Centre?
He was.
Have you provided the inquiry with a main witness statement?
I have.
Do you have that in front of you?
I do.
Is it 50 pages long?
It is.
And if we look at pages 46 and 47, can we see that there is a statement of truth and that you have signed the statement?
It is, and I have.
And is that statement dated the 4th of June of this year?
It is.
You explain, this is paragraph 2, in that statement that it's based on your memory of events and from your understanding of Richard's records and other disclosure and the evidence placed before his inquest. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Have you had an opportunity to read through that statement recently?
I have.
I think there are a couple of minor corrections to be made. Can we just deal with those first, please?
Yes.
First, dealing with paragraph 32, little 4 on page 9. Should the reference in that paragraph be to 12 a.m. rather than 12 p.m.?
It should.
And should the reference in paragraph 52, little 1 on page 13, be to the 17th of May rather than the 17th of March?
It should.
And the reference in paragraph 87, in paragraph 148 of the statement, we could see there reference to the word abdominal. Should that in fact be reference? Should that in fact say abnormal?
It should.
Are there any other corrections that you would like notified just at this moment?
There is one other of a year that's stated as 2015. It was actually 2016, and hopefully we'll pick that up as we pass through.
Was it that way round? 2015 should have been 2016?
That's correct.
Correct, okay. We'll find that and we can notify people if we don't pick it up during this evidence session. Subject to all of that, is this statement true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief?
It is.
Thank you. I'm going to call that your main statement or just your statement. But in fact, you've separately provided something that's entitled an addendum statement. Mm-hmm. Does that contain your suggested recommendations?
Yes, it does.
And that refers to a document that's entitled A Proposal for a National Health Service Mental Health Patient Safety Doctrine, which you've also provided to us.
I have, yes.
I'll refer to that as the doctrine.
Okay.
Please feel free to refer to any of those documents as is helpful to you. Your main statement, your recommendations, the doctrine, all form part of the body of evidence of this inquiry. I won't be asking you about every aspect of them, so please rest assured that the inquiry will take considerable care to scrutinise everything that you've said. Robert, did you provide a commemorative account in relation to Richard at our hearing in September of last year?
I did.
In fact, it was the last day, I think, on the 24th of September.
That's correct, yes.
I think you were accompanied then by your wife, Linda. Yes? And I think Linda is here today, accompanying you today as well. Is that correct? I'd like to start your evidence by talking about Richard. Was he born on the 13th of April 1985?
He was.
Your commemorative evidence in September included that he grew up healthy and strong with a sharp and agile mind.
He did.
He loved sport, particularly cricket.
Very
You
much.
may hear reference to rugby as well, but cricket was his main game.
It was.
And he enjoyed academic success.
He did.
We'll talk a little bit more about that in his time at Essex University in a moment.
Okay.
Before we move on, is there anything else you'd like to say now about Richard? We heard with interest what you said in September, and as I said, we'll touch on his time at Essex and just after that. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell us about him before we move
I
on?
think I said what needed to be said in September, and today I'd like to focus on doing this and doing this alone.
Understood.
But rest assured, he is very much in my mind, as you could imagine.
Yes. Well, let's move to 2007, please. Would Richard have been 21 or 22 years old around that age at this time?
27, I think he was 21.
I wanted to look at something, to address with you something that you say in your statement about this period.
Okay.
I'm going to be looking at from paragraph 3 of your main statement.
Okay.
This is what you say there. Richard's mental health problems first arose in 2007 as an irrational fear of motor neurone disease, or MND. Despite regular visits to GPs and A&E departments, each giving the same reassurances, he could not free himself from those fears. The only treatments he received were antidepressants. He was deeply anxious, causing to him to be restless, pace, and lose sleep. And you say at paragraph 4, a mental health home visit team did assess Richard in 2007. They asked few questions and left after suggesting he consult a neurologist. This being contrary to the GP's assessment of his condition being of depressive origins was not followed. The GP did refer Richard to the same community mental health clinic that made the home visit, but Richard declined the appointment. At a later point that year, and in an attempt to break Richard's depressive cycle, we privately consulted a specialist MND neurologist. And so was a private appointment made for Richard to see a leading MND specialist?
It was, yes.
What was the specialist's diagnosis?
The diagnosis really boiled down to the specialist saying to Richard that I'm going to tell you that you don't have motor neuron disease, but you're not going to believe me, are you? To which Richard said no. His fear was deep-rooted. I think behind that, the consultant made the obvious diagnosis that it was in fact depression that he had, and this was an expression of that depression as motor neurone disease.
Thank you. You describe in your statement how, following that visit, there was a gradual deterioration in Richard's condition.
Yes.
That he was too ill to work, and that he was kept at home in the company of a relative or friend.
Yes.
In fact, is it a feature of the times that Richard had mental ill health that there was close support for him from his family and friends?
Yes, we've got excellent family relations. My sister lived a few miles away, so we were able to draw on uncles, aunts, and nephews who were more than willing to sit there. They'd shared all their Christmases, they'd shared their birthdays and many other things together. So that was there. He had an excellent circle of friends. They were willing to support as well. And of course, his brother, my wife and I would take as much of the burden as we could. So,
And you've mentioned his brother. That's his younger brother.
that's his younger brother, yes.
Can I just check that everyone can hear the evidence clearly? Thank you. Did the deterioration reach a crisis point in around midsummer of 2007?
Yes. The conditions were getting worse and worse. We'd done the rounds of the doctors, we'd done the rounds of the hospital. Along the way, it was obviously that he was becoming depressive, but they seemed to have no way of getting out of the cycle. Whatever resources they had, they were an antidepressant drug or a visit by a home support team or something of that nature. There seemed to be no way from our conversations with them to escalate it to anything meaningful within mental health. So, as we really had been around that cycle many, many times, and Richard's anxious state was growing and growing, that reached a crisis point one afternoon, which is where I think you're going to go next with the home visit by a GP. Or you will do in your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move to that now.
Okay.
Is it right that the GP prescribed a strong sedative?
It is.
For Richard, and what effect did that have?
Well, one of the problems Richard had all the way through was that he couldn't sleep. Richard was a very light sleeper and only slept little. He liked working, and sleep was something he did, but he was always light on that. But even by Richard's statement to standards, the sleep had become far too short to sustain him, which of course accelerated the problems that he experienced. On the day that the doctor got there, he was pacing, talking, he was most uncomfortable. The doctor gave him a strong sedative and he fell asleep. And he slept a long time after that one. That seemed to break the cycle, and in doing that, he then slept longer and longer, sometimes hours and hours at a time during the day as well as at night. And it was the catching up with the sleep that was really the path to recovery. That's what he needed, that is what he had lost, and that is what he got back.
And having had the advantage of the sedative and being able to sleep, was there also a course of private counselling?
Yes. After that, my wife researched and contacted a local counsellor, and that counsellor worked with Richard over a period of time. I can't remember the exact amount of time now, but I don't think that's important. She worked with him as long as necessary. And he came out of that in a much better condition than he went into the final crisis point.
And in fact, the way you put it in your statement is that he could pick up the threads of his life.
Yes, indeed.
I want to come on now to a comment you've made in your statement about this period. Could you put up, please, the main statement at page 2, that's HJA 007877, and expand paragraph 7. I think you've touched on this already, but can we just look at this? It's on the screen in front of you as well. Each of the medical professionals with whom Richard consulted at this time gave him appropriate treatment and care within their compass. What seemed to be missing was any route to specialist resources to hasten Richard's recovery. Now, you've spoken about a route to breaking out of the cycle. Is that the comment here, or is this pointing to something else?
No, that one is alluding to it, if you like. What that's really saying is that each of the doctors we saw were thoroughly professional. They were absolutely correct in what they did. But when they were correct in their diagnosis. But when they come to the point of doing something about mental illness, they had nothing in their toolkit. If it were a physical problem, they would have antibiotics, they would have some other drugs, they would have a route of referral to a consultant, but that seemed to be completely absent on the mental health side. That didn't seem to come about. And so everything they did was within their compass. In other words, they did what they could and they had no more. But what was missing, and as I allude to there, is the specialist resources to assist to Richard's recovery. Now, those special resources, in this case, turned out to be an injection in the arm to put him to sleep, to get him back into sleep patterns, such that he could make his own recovery with his family and his friends around him, supporting him through all of that period, and then at the end of it, taking a course of counselling therapy that moved him then towards the brightest period of his life, and I suspect we'll come to that later again.
But I think this is something of a theme that we might pick up on a little later on, this people working within their own compasses, as you said it, and not having access to the specialist tools that perhaps would have assisted at an earlier stage.
Yes, and from memory, I think I listed them on the second occasion, so there is more detail to give better understanding.
We'll come on to that again then. Could you take that down, please? I'm just picking up on an aspect of that. This is from paragraph 15 of your statement, that the antidepressants prescribed to Richard addressed the chronic aspects of his condition.
Yes.
But it was the sedative he was given during the GP home visit that addressed the acute side and opened the way for his more rapid recovery. That's the point you've just been making, isn't it?
It is, yes. That is that although the antidepressants may have worked in the long term, he really needed to get through a short-term crisis. And the exit route for that crisis was the injection and the sedative that put him to sleep.
You say later in your statement that the use of sedatives allowing him to sleep was the only effective intervention in his suffering. Is that throughout the whole of this period, both 2007 and 2015?
Yes. No, that's the only one that had a marked change. He did on occasion later on try sleeping tablets, but his depression was so far advanced that talking to a friend who's a doctor, he light-heartedly mentioned that he would have needed horse tablets to have had an effect on him. They simply weren't strong enough to have the effect that was desired. They may have been at the limits of what can be prescribed safely, but they weren't adequate for what he needed.
Thank you. Now, let's deal with the time between 2007 and 2015.
Yeah.
You cover this at paragraph 16 of your statement.
Yeah.
You say that the period between the two bouts of mental ill health, as you put it, were the most productive of his life.
Indeed.
You explain that he returned to academia. He studied an MA in history and a PhD in political science at Essex University.
Yes, he did.
And then you, at paragraph 16, you set out some further things that he was... actually, paragraph 11, this is page 2, you set out what he was able to accomplish. Would you just take us through that? This is the bottom of page 2 and the top of page 3.
Yes, while he was at Essex University, having completed his master's, as he got involved, I'll take them in sequence, it's easier to follow. Across the whole of that period, so these aren't in particular order, he founded and helped found the academic student journal that they started publishing again. And he has a paper, which is the first paper in the first edition. So Richard being Richard, he had put himself to the forefront there. That was published, and we're privileged to have a copy of that on a shelf at home. He founded, recruited, trained and led a debating society and team. Essex University at that point didn't have a debating society. Richard was interested in politics, and so he thought, how can I rope as many people as possible into helping me go in the direction I want to go whilst doing them a favour in return? So he started a debating society that he then recruited, trained and took to competitions. So that he had debating competitions. We had the wonderful privilege of meeting some of that team at his funeral. And one young gentleman there, a young Asian gentleman we were talking to, said that he was by nature extremely shy, but having met Richard and been strong-armed into the debating team, he ended up, after university, not necessarily following his degree, but he became a radio presenter with his own programme on an Asian channel in the Birmingham area.
I think you may have told us a little bit more about that in September, actually.
Yeah, it was it's a wonderful little story with that one there. He played for the University Rugby Club, which gave me lots of taxi duty all the way around because Richard did not drive, did not want to drive, and never probably would drive. And that was probably a good thing for all of us. He did many things well, driving was not one of them. He became a lecturer in American politics. He's always been fascinated by America and its politics, particularly the lead up into and out of the 1960s period. And so he used to lecture on that, and that would supplement his income, and that was while he was doing a PhD.
And in fact, I remember in September you brought a copy of his book along.
Yes.
And you referred to that in paragraph 14. Just tell us briefly about that.
Yes. Richard's fascination in politics is not only the PhD, but he took that further. He wrote a book, it's called Conservative Economic Policy, from Heath in Opposition to Cameron in Coalition, which he interviewed many people, Norman Tebbit, and a list of illustrious people of that sort of standard are on there. And I still have the recordings of those interviews. I can't bring myself to listen to them, but I think there will at some point be an appropriate academic library where they should sit.
You say elsewhere that Richard enjoyed good physical health.
Yes, he did. He was as strong as an ox.
And it sounds from your evidence as if in this period between 2007 and 2015, he was thriving for much of that time.
Sorry, he was?
He was thriving.
Thriving, yes, he was.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid that does bring us now to 2015 and the reappearance of the symptoms. Yeah. Did his fear of MND first reappear in early May 2015?
Yes, round about that time.
So you cover this at paragraph 17. In fact, you give it a date, the 4th of May.
Yeah. His depression had started to become evident before that in very small parts, but again, it accelerated away. So finding the date of the transition is very difficult to pin on that one.
But from around early May?
Yes, that would be reasonable.
You then describe in your statement the period between the 4th and the 12th of May, when Richard saw the GP on various occasions and attended Broomfield Hospital A&E. Yeah. And during this period, was he described diazepam, sleeping tablets and antidepressants?
Yes, but different things with different doctors. Different things. But in the round, yes.
Yeah. Did he in fact see GPs from two different surgeries, his own GP in Essex and your local GP in Suffolk?
Yes.
And that may become relevant a little later on.
Okay.
Let's just be clear. At this time in 2015, was Richard living in Essex and your family home where you were was in Suffolk, correct?
Yes. Yes. Richard lived in Chelmsford and he commuted into London on a daily basis. And then he would come and visit us as often as he reasonably could in Sudbury in Suffolk.
Thank you very much. Now, the medication that he was prescribed at this stage, did that make any difference to his condition?
None at all.
As far as you could see, during this period, was there any thought given to sort of a longer-term care plan?
No.
During this time, did any doctor consider or discuss with you or Richard, as far as you're aware, the question of a possible admission?
No.
So this is what you say in your statement at paragraph 245. Identifying the sequence of the phases of Richard's deterioration in both episodes, so that's 2007 and 2015, of his illness, it appears that the second phase, or pre-crisis, was the point at which decisive intervention would have been most beneficial.
Yes.
And yet, in the decisions and prescriptions of both GPs and A&E, they were ineffective in preventing the crisis phase that followed. And you add in a paragraph afterwards, 247, that in the case of Richard, the routes for prompt escalation either did not exist or were not used. His progression into crisis was inevitable. And you say in the next paragraph, having considered his decline into mental health crisis on 2 occasions and repeated failure to act effectively during his pre-crisis period, it is clear that Richard did not receive adequate treatment. So I'd like to just take stock and make sure I understand the importance of what you've said there, please. Are you saying that a key issue in Richard's case was a failure to act at an early stage, pre-crisis, and in doing so to avert the development of the actual crisis itself.
Absolutely.
Are you saying that the mechanisms were not in place at this time for this to happen?
They were either not in place or they were not used. I do not know which.
And in fact, is this one of the areas that the doctrine that you've put forward seeks to cover? And we'll come on to that.
Can I just ask you, you have pointed us in the direction of the sedatives that were given to him in the earlier phase. Do you believe that that is one of the things that would have helped at this stage? Or do you not have a view about what that early intervention should have looked like?
Yeah, I've given some thought to that point. I don't think it's important what the treatment is specifically. What is important is that the meaningful intervention comes before the transition from the first phase of the mental illness taking root, before it then accelerates away. And that goes into the crisis phase that follows. It's the aversion of that second part. In Richard's case, it was indeed the sedative. Now, there's an aversion to giving sedatives outside, and I remember in the news many years ago there were cases of sedatives being used just as liquid cosh to put patients out so that they wouldn't be a trouble during the day and the night, and quite a campaign led on that, and the consequence of that was that the idea of using sedatives on patients was frowned upon. But what it was right insofar as those for whom it was not necessary, but it seems that it was no longer available for those that it was necessary for. And from that part there, it means that for those for whom that type of treatment is appropriate, if it's not available, they will inevitably make the transition from the non-crisis phase to the crisis phase, and there is nothing to stop them because the illness has taken over.
Thank you.
I'd like to move now to the 16th of May. This is the assessment. Was that a Saturday?
Yes, it was.
You describe in your statement that Richard's next contact with medical professionals was the Suffolk Mental Health Crisis Team at your home on that evening, Saturday the 16th of May.
That's correct, yes.
Now, did they work as part of the Norfolk and Suffolk NHS Foundation Trust, as far as you're aware?
They did.
And did an assessment take place in circumstances we'll come on to in a moment by an emergency mental health assessor?
Yes, yeah.
And if we need to, let's refer to her as the mental health assessor.
Okay.
Did she attend with 2 police officers?
She did.
This is from paragraph 17 of your main statement and 22. Now, was this the only time that Richard had an assessment of this type?
Yes, it was. Yeah, he had seen the mental health team visit in the previous one, but he didn't have a full assessment on that.
Now, from paragraph 22 in your statement, you describe what happened at this stage. In essence, was it this? Was Richard pacing outside the family home, and did he refuse to re-enter, for example, for dinner?
That's right.
Was the assessment therefore carried out in the street outside your home?
Yes, it was.
What was the temperature like at this time? Do you remember?
It was a May day, so at that particular point in the day, it wasn't too uncomfortable. That, I think, will come to shortly.
Was he in fact outside for several hours?
He was, yes.
And did the temperature drop during that time?
Yes, it did.
And did you have to take action, for example, sending out warm food and clothing?
Yes.
What involvement did you and your family have in this assessment that was taking place outside of the house?
None whatsoever.
Were you, however, able to give the mental health assessor background information about Richard's illness?
We were, yes.
A decision was made to take him to a mental health facility. Were you involved in that decision at all?
Yes, we were. It was clear that he needed to go to a mental health facility, and the obvious one for the mental health nurse, for the assessing nurse at our house, was to use the trust for which she worked, which was Norfolk and Suffolk. But they wouldn't take him. They thought that he should go to Essex. And he should go to Essex because although he was in Suffolk visiting us, his GP was in Essex, and so they should take him. And that formed the basis of a long delay through that evening before he finally got an admission.
So you say you were outside, or he was outside for hours. Was much of that time actually taken up in working out where he should go?
There was two big chunks. One of them was giving the nurse the information she needed to support the decision that she'd pretty much already come to. A very small part was then deciding what type of admission it should be. Perhaps we'll leave that.
Well, in fact, ultimately was the decision that it should be a voluntary admission.
It was, and we had a strong influence on that under guidance from the nurse, which I think was the correct decision in itself.
Before we move on to Richard's being taken to the Linden Centre, I just want to ask you about the kind of information you were able to give to the mental health assessor, because this may become relevant.
Okay.
You explain in your statement that you gave all the relevant information that you could, and you say this is paragraph 22, nothing was left out.
No, everything she asked, everything that we could think of, we told her.
You add, and this is at 22(11) on page 6, we covered the issue of suicide. Now, do you recall, and I'm sorry to ask you this, but do you recall what you informed the mental health assessor of in terms of suicide?
We told her that he had discussed taking his own life with his aunt, my sister, and that he wanted her to take him to the bridge so that he could jump off at the centre mark of it. My wife is Welsh and I am English. And in Richard's mind, the way he thought it would be so that we could not determine which country he had taken his life in. And so he wanted to go to the bridge. He also had very good family links into Wales, as strong as those in England, just more remote. And it would have been a very jumbled mind, making not the best of decisions, but something that seemed sensible to his troubled mind at that time.
But this is obviously something he thought about and articulated quite clearly.
He's thought about it, articulated. He's by this stage probably researched something about on the internet, and we're certain at a later point that he had.
And was that information that you passed on to the mental health assessor?
Yes.
You say this at paragraph 85 of your statement as well. This is page 19. You say on the 16th of May, so during this session as I understand it, I gave the mental health assessor a warning that if Richard became overwhelmed by his suicidal ideations and there was a flaw in the safety policies and procedures in a ward, he would quickly identify it. Now, is that correct? Was that also information that you provided to the mental health assessor whilst Richard was outside the house?
I did, yes.
Thank you. Did you become aware that a bed had been secured in a mental health ward ultimately and that Richard would be admitted?
Yes. Well, I would like to explain a little around that selection process.
Yes.
The selection process wasn't the trusts. There were now two trusts negotiating over Richard, North Essex and Norfolk and Suffolk. But they weren't negotiating to have him, they were negotiating for the other one to have him. They didn't want him. The saddening part of that is, in truth, both had beds available. Neither wanted to fill it. So the nurse, who I have great sympathy for, was just left to hang out to dry in our house while they fought out what they wanted to do.
And you say in your statement, this is paragraph 31, why wasn't Richard not simply taken to the nearest available and most appropriate facility? And is that a strong feeling you have now?
It is, very much. I think I'd go on to say that if they needed to transfer him subsequent to that, they could make any financial arrangements between themselves. And it would surprise me if they haven't got such a facility. What I couldn't understand is if neither of them wanted to, and all of those counties are in East Anglia, at what point is that a national health service? Well, it wasn't. There were independent health services, each protecting their own interest at that time.
Thank you. And I think the situation outside the house was made even worse by a troubling allegation that Richard made against you.
Correct.
Did he accuse you of trying to kill him? Did it quickly become apparent that there was nothing to answer for, but at least did it demonstrate the state of mind that he was in at the time?
Yeah, it was more that I think it was I wanted to kill him, but I don't think it makes that much difference to the type of accusation made. That accusation was made, and the police officer that it was made to, I knew nothing about this, and I was walking around trying to arrange things and trying to help the nurse get the arrangements correct for getting Richard into appropriate care. And as I walked through the hall, the policeman suddenly and very forcibly said, "Your son says you want to kill him." I must be honest, that took me aback. That was an utterly shocking and awful thing to hear. I think with a little bit of reading the room and a touch of sensitivity, as much as he was compelled to deal with the issues, I don't think it'd be difficult to come up with 1,001 better ways than that.
So a more compassionate approach or a more understanding approach would have been in order?
I think if he's an experienced police officer, and he would have read the situation outside and Richard's condition. He would have had a good idea of what type of family it was he was dealing with, the people that were there, and if it was at all credible, and balanced his approach on those factors. I don't think for a minute he shouldn't have challenged me in some way, because that's a serious thing for someone to say. And if he doesn't follow up on it and it leads to a consequence later, that has its own problems. So, yes, by all means follow it up, but think, be considerate, be compassionate, and be thoughtful to circumstance, context, and all that you see around you. Because that, after all, is what they should be trained for.
Thank you. And in fact, was there another repercussion of the allegation that Richard had made? Was that, in fact, as you say in your statement, that it made it next to impossible for you fully to participate in identifying the best course of action for Richard?
Well, it would, and it did. The accusation having been made, the nurse has to take that into consideration in putting in her thoughts and what she advises, a degree of protection for Richard, such that if it turns out to be true, that can be thought of and considered. So yes, it somewhat cramped my style.
We're going to move off from this time in a moment. Before we do, I'd like to look at an aspect of your statement, please.
Yeah.
Could you put up page 6 of the statement? This is HJA 007877, and expand little 12 to 14 at the bottom of the page. In fact, can we see at the bottom our one concern? So this is at this stage, whilst the assessment is taking place outside your house. Our one concern was his safety, and my wife, Linda, asked the mental health assessor, will he be safe? And her reply was yes. Now, do you recall, did you hear that as well?
Yes, I was down.
Do you recall how you and Linda felt on hearing that?
I think relief is the main thing. We knew that he was in a desperate situation. The behaviour that he was exhibiting was completely alien to his normal nature in every way. We were deeply concerned for his safety and what might happen to him. And when we heard that, and knowing that he would be going to a specialist hospital that should be able to recognise and treat his condition and know that he will be safe and therefore able to recover, and maybe this time it happened, the sequence of events of the motor neuron disease having happened twice, we'd have to put a longer term programme in place for and with Richard. But no, that was a relief in itself.
Can you take that down, please? We're going to move on now, Robert, to Richard's admission at the Linden Centre. Before we do, is there anything further you'd like to raise about the time that Richard was assessed outside the house and what happened at that stage?
I think we've covered all of the key issues that go with that one.
So let's come on now.
Sorry, may I just say one thing? The nurse at that point did come up for a lot of pressure later on in other investigations and the inquiry and questioning of me when I talked to the trust, which I think all of it was wholly misplaced. And I think she managed a difficult situation to the best that her experience and ability allowed her.
And in fact, we're going to come on in a moment to another difficult situation involving her, aren't we?
Okay.
Just coming on then to Richard's admission at the Linden Centre in Chelmsford, was he admitted to Finchingfield Ward?
Yes, he was.
Now that, we understand, is an acute adult inpatient ward.
Yes.
Was this Richard's first ever admission to a mental health ward?
It was.
And as we've established, this was an informal admission.
Indeed.
Did he arrive for admission procedure at about 12 a.m. and did he enter the ward at about 1 a.m. on Sunday the 17th of May?
I think those times are about right in the documents I have.
Did you and Linda also make your way to the Linden Centre, but a little later on, as we'll hear?
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear that one.
Sorry, did you... So Richard's gone and been admitted around in the very early hours of Sunday the 17th
Yes.
of May 2015. Is it right that you and Linda also went to the Linden Centre, but that was a little bit later on?
That's correct, yes.
Thank you. If at any stage I say something that you can't hear, please make sure to stop me, as you just did. Thank you. Now, what I want to come on to, first of all, is what you describe in your statement as it's an issue between the mental health assessor and the receiving staff nurse on the ward.
Yeah.
Have you learned that this issue occurred at the time of his admission to the Linden Centre? So the mental health assessor from the Norfolk-Suffolk Trust, as you've described, and the admitting nurse at the Linden Centre from NEPT. Let's refer to the admitting nurse as the staff nurse. Was the issue, as you understand it, that the staff nurse refused to accept the mental health assessor's oral statement? Can you just explain a little bit more of your understanding of what the issue was at this stage?
Okay. While at our house, the mental health nurse took copious notes. So our expectation is that those notes would have gone down and that would be part of the handover procedure.
Were they handwritten notes?
Sorry?
Were they handwritten notes?
They were handwritten notes, yes. Now, upon the admission, she tried to get, as I understand it, and this is from two sources. One is the documents that I've seen and the other one is from comments from... I'll just see how you refer to him, to DI in your notes.
So the detective inspector from... We'll hear that there were two criminal investigations. And
yes, there were. It's the first of the two on this one. The DI, not the DCI in this case. When we spoke to him as they were doing the first of the corporate manslaughter inquiries into Richard's death, he intimated to us that it was clear that the handover process had been fractious and uncomfortable in what happened. So the nurse taking Richard down wanted to do an oral handover, as you said. That was not acceptable to the staff nurse as the admitting professional. There was back and forth, it seems, about who should then enter it into their system, and it ended up with the assessing nurse from Suffolk having to try and enter the data into Essex system, even though the admitting nurse was there. At this point, the information is supposedly going in, but what is unusual is if you read the statements that I've managed to acquire that were taken as the interview statements that led up to the serious incident report of the staff nurse that was the admitting nurse, She then claims in her statements that during the early hours of the morning she entered all the data herself. So it's very difficult to work out who did what and when. But that there was a disagreement, I don't know at what level, and I don't know where blame, if any, would lie, because I was not there and that's not in any of the records. But certainly the DI felt uncomfortable with the way that that was done.
And would this be another example of a mismatch potentially between two different NHS areas, Norfolk, Suffolk on the one hand and Essex on the other? Or do you think this was more of a personal thing?
Like another piece of evidence we'll come to, I think it's possibly, maybe, probably both.
Fine, thank you. From what you've learnt subsequently, do you believe that the information you gave to the mental health assessor about Richard's suicidal ideations was passed on to staff at the Linden Centre?
I think the straightforward answer to that is no, not all of it was handed over. But what was handed over, one must then ask the question, was that sufficient? I suspect you'll come on to that a little bit later as well, or I can expand on that now if you wish.
Well, why don't you expand on it briefly now, and if we need to go further, we can.
Right. The question is one, to my mind, not of what information were they given, but did they have adequate information to manage Richard's condition safely? Now, my opinion on that is yes. Not just because I'm Richard's father, but because if you look at the requirements in the trust documentation and you map what they actually said they had to those requirements, it was more than met. But that's not just my opinion. There was another doctor, and and his name is on here as the consultant psychologist, wrote a report on behalf of Essex Police as an independent report. And when he wrote his report, I've got a copy there somewhere, he made it absolutely clear that they had obtained all of the information that they required to manage Richard's condition properly.
Well, we're going to track that through, for example, with the question of the level of observations that was set.
Okay, yeah.
So that we'll illuminate that in a moment.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things, just going back to the time when the mental health assessor was presenting her handwritten notes and whatever happened at that stage, yeah. I just want to refer to what you say in your statement. This is paragraph 38. You expressed your huge concern that their professional focus was not on prioritising Richard's needs. And you raised the question of a friction in the acceptance and admission process and whether that led to poor judgment. So that's paragraph 38 and also paragraph 241. I just wanted to ensure that we have on the record those concerns that you've raised in relation to that stage of the admission.
Yeah. Friction normally between people frequently leads to competition, and competition means somebody has to win.
Yes.
But the person that lost was Richard.
Thank you. Now, you described next that after he was admitted, Richard was assessed by a locum doctor. Can we refer to him as the locum doctor?
Yes.
You raised concern in your statement that he was only a locum doctor. This is paragraph 240. Could you just explain a little bit more what the nature of your concern was? 240, it's page 44.
Okay. Okay, on the very first question I raised there was the locum doctor who assessed Richard sufficiently experienced in mental health practice. I do have an answer for that one, and the answer is, in my opinion, no. The locum doctor, I did look into his background a little bit, had been trained in St. Petersburg in Russia. He was not a full member of the Institute of Psychologists. He was an associate, and yet, as a locum doctor, turning up to make a full assessment on what type of treatment was necessary, he was effectively wielding the power of a consultant, since there was no one senior there to challenge him. I cannot understand why you would take a locum doctor who isn't fully experienced in the craft that he wishes to perform and make better and stronger decisions. In fairness to the doctor and in line with the report by the chartered psychiatrist, he did indeed elicit the necessary information from Richard to make a good decision. It's what he did with the decision where things went wrong, and that was on the level of the observations that Richard was placed on.
And we'll come on to that in just one moment.
But may I add one further point at this point, and that is, as a locum, he would not have known precisely what all of the practices and how they were performed inside that hospital. So how could he have given good guidance on what level of observation to give if he wasn't experienced either as a full psychiatrist, as a member of the appropriate institute, or familiar with the hospital?
So a key question in your mind was the staff sufficiently senior and experienced to be conducting this assessment at this stage?
In the case of the doctor, yes.
Thank you. What I want to move on now, and we'll come on to the level of observations that were set in just a moment, but what I want to deal with now is the nature of the search that was conducted of Richard. Yeah. And we know that there is an issue about a failure to remove dangerous items. Mm-hmm. I want to ask you about the items that Richard was left with after his admission to Finchingfield Ward. I'm going to ask that a part of your statements put up on our screens when you address this. Could you please put up page 10 of the statement, HJA 007-877, and expand paragraphs 36 to 37? So this is what you say here. The search of Richard's possessions was cursory at best, leaving Richard, known to have suicidal ideation, with shoelaces, electric cords, razors, scissors, and his dressing gown cord with which he took his life.
That's correct.
You add this. This search was found to be inadequate at Richard's inquest, forming the basis for a prevention of future deaths instruction to the trust by the coroner.
Yes.
To be clear, Richard was allowed to retain a dressing gown with a cord on admission to the ward.
Those items were still in his bag when that bag was returned to us after his death.
In fact, you say later in your statement that only one thing was confiscated from him, which was some deodorant spray.
That's right.
And that was even though some of these other items were also considered to be what they term contraband, the razors and the scissors, that it's made clear that the list of contraband is not exhaustive, and that it's also made clear that anything that a person possesses that they intend to be used to harm themselves or others should be removed.
That's correct.
That's all correct.
Yeah, if I could just expand on that a little. There is a meaningful and profound difference between the spray and the other items. If you read the documents, the spray comes under the classification of those items that can be used to harm staff. So they removed that from him. What they didn't remove were the things with which he could harm himself. The list that you refer to, which is the advisory one, also hangs in the area that the searches are taken. And that list is a list of examples that clearly states they're there as examples, is taken pretty much as the policy. And it's even written as if that is the policy in the serious incident report. And so the serious incident report was written by a very senior member of the nursing team, and that person is presenting it as if it's policy, when either he knows it isn't, or he knows it is and is saying it anyway, and I don't think either of those two positions are good in my mind.
In fact, you just referred that we know that there was the inquest, obviously. We'll come on to the investigations.
Yep, of course.
There was also something that was called an investigation that led to something called a 72-hour report. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Now, that's dated the 14th of September 2015, according to your statement. Was one of the two recommendations it made that staff receive refresher training on security checks and patient belongings. This is paragraph 123.
Yeah. I'm just getting the report now so that I can check
well,
that that's...
If you look at your statement, it's at page 25.
Yeah.
And paragraph 123. Do you see at little 1, there's the reference to the 72-hour report. This is page 25.
25.
Paragraph 123.
Yeah.
2 investigations, the 72-hour report. Can you see the second of the 2 recommendations?
That's the one where is the mistake. I couldn't remember where it was.
Okay.
Yeah. The date we received the report was on the 14th of September 2016, not 2015. That was caused by an email that I received from the trust where this dates the report as the first time of the appearance of the report in this train of emails is on the 20th of May 2015, which would indeed put it in the 72-hour framework. It was first given to the gentleman that led the interface with us as a family in 2016, and he then passed it on to us. I have several problems with that, in that we had a meeting with the Trust on the 5th of August 2015, and at that time we were not told this report existed.
So is it right, there's an issue either with the timing, the date of the report, or with failure to disclose it in a timely manner to you?
One or other, and once again, both are possible.
Thank you. But this, as we can see, as you subsequently learnt, can we see that one of the 2 recommendations actually related to? So if you look at 1, 2, 3, do you see little b there? That staff receive refresher training on security checks and patient belongings. I just want to trace this through. And you've also made reference to a serious incident investigation report. We'll touch on this later, but it's probably right to note right from the beginning that you take serious issue with lots of aspects of this report.
Yes.
This is from December 2015, as I understand it from your statement. That includes, and this is paragraph 164 of your statement at page 26, that includes that there appeared to be a lack of robustness in the searching. 164.
Correct. Yeah.
Sorry, 120. Yeah. So both of the investigations conducted immediately after the death also reached conclusions of concern in relation to the failure to take dangerous items from Richard.
Yes.
In fact, in your statement, you describe the failure in relation to the search as best described as a failure in policy. Mm-hmm. Can you explain what you meant by that?
Can you refer me to the paragraph?
Yes,
please,
it's paragraph 174 at page 33, just at the bottom of the page.
Did you say 173? Yeah.
174, just at the bottom.
Yes, I've got it. It's stated at the beginning of this section that the author wrote there was a lack of robustness. Well, there was a lack of robustness, but there are several things. The policy itself outlines quite clearly what should and shouldn't be done. What is absolutely clear is that the policies aren't followed, and neither are the policies understood by the staff. That's not just true of this policy. It seems to be true of every policy that I've come across. Each and every one has been misapplied in some way or other. Sorry, I'm just trying to gather my thoughts here and get this part dead right. The people doing the search go by the convenient list that's placed just in front of them. They do not seem to have an understanding of what the policy is. Now, supposedly they're trained on it. Clearly they are not. Now, if you look at all their policies are thick, complex, And whatever you are doing, you have to know where that is in the policy to go there and go and get the advice that you're seeking. But then you don't know it's there because you haven't read the policy or been trained properly. So it is a policy failure in that the policies are monolithic documents that I would suspect for the people doing those particular jobs and the pressures that they have in doing their jobs, they're never going to get the time to read them and fully understand them. And it's that second part. So their policies fail.
Can I just make sure I've understood what you're saying?
Yep.
So this is an issue of policy, and what you're referring to here is trust policy.
Yes.
It's an issue of policy here specifically in relation to search procedures, but you say, in fact, it looks as if it's a wider problem as well, beyond just this policy.
Yes, I would say it's in the entire practice of the trust. And maybe I'll expand on that later.
It's an issue in relation to staff adherence to policy,
Yep.
to the clarity or brevity of that policy,
Yes.
and to training or lack of it in relation to the policy.
Yes.
Does that cover all of those?
Yes. Sum it up. If I were doing that job, if I were expected to read those policies, go on the ward and do them, I wouldn't know how to do it.
I'm about to leave this topic of the search, Robert.
Yeah.
Before I do, is there anything else you'd like to say or raise about that aspect of Richard's experience?
There is another aspect on one of the statements in the 3-day report, but I think that will probably come up in another section. If not, I'll raise it at the end.
Okay, that's fine. So what I want to do now, please, is come on to the question of observations and risk assessment. And you've already adverted to this previously. You explain in your statement that following the examination by the locum doctor, a meeting was held to determine, amongst other things, the level of observations that was to be applied to Richard. Have I understood that correctly?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Once more.
I'm going to say that again. If there's an ongoing issue, we may see if we can put up the volume of the microphone. You explain that following the examination by the locum doctor, a meeting was held to determine, amongst other things, the level of observations that was to be applied to Richard.
Yes.
Have I understood that correctly?
Yes, you have.
What kind of meeting do you understand this to have been, and for what purpose other than specifically to fix an observation level?
Right. The meeting, as I understand it, and what the documents suggest go on, is not much more than people sit in a room and they talk about what they're going to do. I'm not aware of there being a structured methodology to that meeting in reaching it. In other words, some form of flow chart or anything like that was used, because there is nothing like that in the records that I have been given or I have seen.
Is this what's sometimes referred to as a multidisciplinary team meeting, or do you not know?
I do know about the multidisciplinary team meetings. If it is such an official sounding meeting, it was an unofficial and ad hoc version of it.
Thank you. You explain, this is from a paragraph 134 of your statement, you explain that the decision reached at this meeting was for level 2 observations.
Yeah.
We'll come on to that in a moment.
Yeah.
And you explain that this means 4 observations an hour. And you separately explain in your statement that staff have explained in various interviews that level 2 observations were the standard for new admissions.
They have, but I disagree with that from their policy documents.
Thank you. Now, the inquiry has received evidence from EPUT, so the successor trust, concerning the different levels of observations at that trust.
Okay.
They start at level 1, which is general observations, which involves knowing the patient's location, but without the need to keep them in sight. They then include enhanced levels from 2 to 4. The minimum of the enhanced levels, as we have been told, is level 2 or intermittent observations, where it's necessary to check a patient a minimum of 4 times an hour. Now, it sounds as if that's the level that you're talking about here that was applied to Richard. Is that your...
The level 2 was
Level
the one
2.
that was applied, that's correct.
Then there's level 3, which is sometimes referred to as continuous within eyesight. So this is a more enhanced level, where staff are allocated to each patient, and the patient must be kept in continuous eyesight. And then there's an even more enhanced level at 4, which is continuous within arm's length, where staff are allocated to observe a patient in close proximity.
Yes.
Now, I think we're at least concerned with levels 2 and 3, is that right?
I think they're the appropriate
Yes.
2 for this.
And
yes.
does the level, we'll come on to this in a moment, but
Yeah.
I've just described level 3 at EPUT. Does that actually equate to your understanding of level 3 also?
Yes, it does.
Thank you. Given what was known about Richard, what is your view about observations being set at level 2, so a minimum of 4 times an hour?
Okay. If I go back one point to the setting of the levels, that is, the policy documents do not say that the standard observation level is level 2. It's not in their documents. What the documents for their policies actually say is that the appropriate level should be applied on the information that is known. In a separate document, it says that if the patient, that the big warning flag, if you like, is suicide. And it was clearly stated, and it is on all the documentation of the trust, that Richard was suicidal. The trust, and even what I classify as the better nurses within it in the communications that I've had, misunderstand that policy. They seem to have very fixed, this is what we do, attitudes, and are incapable of changing from it. And I'll give you an example of that. One particular staff nurse, and it's on the list but I won't refer to it at the moment, came in the morning and said that she was shocked that Richard was on level 2. But the trust is so inflexible, or even though their policies state that she has the authority to increase the level of observation, though not decrease them, which seems sensible, she didn't do so, but she had the authority to do so. So, and that is another point that is taken up by the consultant psychiatrist with the police, that they are inflexible in the application of their policies. So they arrived at convincing themselves that level 2 was the one they always did. They did not go to level 3, although they had the power to do so. And I think that in going to level 2, with Richard known to be suicidal, and letting him have a shower is a critical part of how he took his life.
Can I just ask, why do you say they were right, or in their own minds they were right to put him on level 2?
Because they've absolutely convinced themselves that their standard practices, the things they do day to day, are in fact what the policies are, whereas the policies don't say what they think they do. They do not seem to be aware of their own policies.
So you'd say it's a matter of habit that they put people on level 2?
I think that would be a reasonable way to express it, yes.
You say elsewhere in your statement that, in your view, Richard was at immediate risk.
Yes.
And you explain that NEPT should have taken a more proactive approach to his care, having regard to his suicidal ideation and as directed by its own policies.
Yes.
And they should have immediately placed him under one-to-one observations.
Yes. If I may point out a flaw in their thinking on level 2 observations. It's the observations are 4 times an hour, which leads everyone instantly to go, well, that will be every 15 minutes. No, they should be done randomly, and the trust is right in that. They do them randomly. But the idea of doing them randomly is so that the patient never knows when they're going to be observed. In other words, they don't know when they're not being observed. They can't be certain of it. But since they'd given Richard unfettered and unsupervised access to the bathroom, Richard would have known at that point that no one was going to disturb him, which completely nullifies their thinking in using random observations, because they've cancelled out the randomness by putting a safe period into it.
What do you think would be different if Richard had been on a more enhanced level of observations on Finchingfield Ward?
All the conversation that follows would not be taking place. None of it. Would Richard still be alive today? I would hope so. Richard was ill on 2 occasions with exactly the same thing. So that's the start of a trend. So it is feasible that he may have had to manage that for the rest of his life. And we've discussed that as a possibility between us. But we never got to that point. They didn't put him on level 3, they put him on level 2, and as I warned the nurse the night before, if there is a flaw in your processes, he will see it. And he did.
You say at paragraph 90 of your statement that Richard would have been helped through his crisis and survived,
Yep.
and with proper care and guidance have found a way to live a fruitful life.
Indeed.
Does that accurately summarise the significance in your eyes of setting the wrong observation level?
Correct.
Robert, I'm going to move on to a new topic in a moment. Before I do, is there anything else that you would like to raise on the issue of risk assessment and observation levels?
No, not at the moment.
Thank you. Chair, it's 3:15. We've been going for an hour and a quarter. I wonder if now might be a convenient moment for a 10-minute break. So that will take us to 3:25. I'd like to move on to ask you about the extent to which staff involved Richard in his own care at the Linden Centre, even for the short time he was there, and also the extent to which the family was involved. I'd like first to see what you said about Richard's care management and plans. And I'm going to turn to paragraph 70 of your statement. What you say there is that an undated and unsigned care plan was shown to us, but as far as we're aware, Richard was not involved in its creation. The Trust claiming that he was too compliant. What did you understand by that term, too compliant?
Okay. The care plan that we were shown was the first 2 of 3 pages. The original one did not have a 3rd page, so we did not have a signature, a date, or an identity. A 3rd page did turn up some weeks later, which surprised me because I don't see how the document would be separated, but it did turn up sometime later when we kept pressing for it. When you read the care plan, it is just completely generic in its terms. And if it was trying to do anything for an individual, it just didn't do it. And besides, if you spoke to Richard, you would remember it. He had a knack of being in your mind and remembering him. And in what they wrote, there was none of his voice, and his voice would have been there had he spoken. Had he had the chance to speak, in fact. So we challenged that in that there was nothing in his voice, and it was clear that they hadn't seen Richard when they developed this care plan, which they accepted on the basis that he was too compliant. The idea being that because he was so ill and because he had just do everything he was told, whatever he said would therefore be meaningless and of no value to the care plan. So I asked the obvious question, and that is how non-compliant must you be before you get a care plan? And I've never received an answer to that obvious question.
To what extent was the family involved in decisions relating to Richard's care, again for the short time he was on the ward?
Not at all. We did try to contact the trust in the morning. My wife called them, I think about 7:30. I think the times are in here somewhere. Called early, and they promised to call back. They didn't call back, so she made another call. But we had no chance to make any input at all on the care plan. We couldn't even find out how he was.
And do you think in total, you say somewhere in your statement, that he was actually on Finchingfield Ward for no more than 12 hours?
That's right.
In total?
Yeah.
Is it right that when you phoned the Linden Centre on the morning of Sunday the 17th of May, you were told that Richard's phone battery was drained, that he'd asked for a charger, but that none was available?
Yes.
So were you able to talk at any stage by phone with him whilst he was at the Linden Centre?
No.
In fact, was the last time that any of you spoke to him during the time outside your house on the 16th, Saturday the 16th?
Yes. Well, that would be true for me, because I went out with him but withdrew when it was clear that it wasn't going in a good direction. That's when I left him with a neighbour, really sensible man who just managed it beautifully till the police got there. My wife only saw him in the house before he thought of going outside, and my second son would only have seen him before he left to go back to his role.
Thank you very much. Could I now ask you about a plan to move Richard out of the Linden Centre?
Yeah.
And I'd like to look at a part of your statement where you address this. Could you put up, please, page 20 of the statement? That's HJA 007 877, and expand paragraph 94. So you say this: we had no immediate concerns on the evening of 16th of May beyond what one would expect for a son and brother. We were too exhausted and needed sleep for the coming day. It was due to the lack of information from and response to my wife's call to the Linden Centre that we started to have doubts about the Linden Centre. That's the call you've just referred to. Mm-hmm. An internet search on the morning of the 17th of May revealed many poor reports and serious concerns regarding safety and treatment, and so we formulated a plan to move Richard to a safer location. So your concerns were raised both by your own experience with the Linden Centre and what you'd been able to access online, is that right?
That's correct.
Could you go over the page, please, and expand the next two paragraphs?
Sorry, can I just ask one?
Yes, of course.
What time did your wife phone the Linden Centre?
It was about, first one I think was about 7:30, the second one was 9 or 9:30, something like that, so a while later.
And you've criticised or suggested that you were not engaged in any way in the care plan that night before. Mm-hmm. Had you been, what would you have said? What would you have asked them to do?
Well, I think the first thing that would come out, given that their observation levels were inappropriate for someone with suicidal ideation. For example, on the admission policy, when they're going in and in the suicide policies, that the danger points should be recognised as those when someone first enters, and if they're unknown to the trust, both of which were true of Richard at that time, as well as all of the other suicidal ideations that sit on top of it. So those two factors were in breach of their own policy as well. So I think the key thing that I would have been looking for was that they were close to him, knew what his behaviours were, and got to understand the troubles that he had. Particularly in terms of motor neurone disease, because apart from mentioning it in one or two documents, nothing was done around that at all, and no record of any way of trying to calm him down about it. Now, the reason on the previous example that you showed as to why we were so exhausted by the time Richard left was for the 2 weeks as the motor neurone disease got the better of the depression, it became the prominent concern on his mind. We spent massive amounts of time trying to talk him down and calm him around that motor neurone disease. The concept and the idea that he could have got in a police car, be taken to another location, walk in and be utterly calm about something that had denied him sleep for weeks or months, to the point of crisis all the way through, and he'd just lie down and have a good night's sleep, is a patent nonsense. So, yeah, that's where I'd really be starting from. They had completely the wrong end of the stick, and in many ways, I believe, by convenience and choice.
Not at all. Can we just look at just continue what we were looking at, the top two paragraphs? The plan was that my wife and I would drive to the Linden Centre and re-establish communications with Richard. Yeah. And given the events of the previous evening, possibly with me waiting in my car, our son would drive to Richard's flat to retrieve details of his private health insurance and then meet up with us and Richard. Once Richard had agreed a way forward and a new hospital found, he would have been moved to that location. And then you say this: fate intervened and we were to be too late by minutes.
Yes.
And we'll move on to see what you mean by that in just a moment.
Yep.
Could you take that down, please? Did you and your wife Linda go to the Linden Centre at just before noon on Sunday the 17th of May?
Yes.
When you arrived, were you met by a healthcare assistant at the entrance of the Linden Centre?
Yes, but if I could lead you towards that.
Yes.
Well, we arrived at the Linden Centre, we turned up, and you enter a sort of vestibule type area, and there is a controlled door inside that, and you can see into an office over to your left. There's an open area behind glass panelling and walling, and you can see the patients, you can see what's going on, and there's a restaurant over to your right-hand side, cafeteria area. There was no one in that area at that time.
So you say in your statement, personal ID was not requested, and you weren't asked to sign a visitor's register?
No. What happened was we were stood at the entrance trying to gain access, and someone walked over, opened the door, and that's the healthcare assistant that you mentioned. And he said to us, "You must be Mr. and Mrs. Wade." We hadn't introduced ourselves. We never said yes, and we never said no. He simply took it that we were. When I wondered how he managed to recognise us, he told us it's because we looked like Richard. I think if you look at the photograph, he looks no more like us than any other human being would.
Well, we'll come on to the photo at the end.
Okay.
So, yes.
Having done that part there and spoken to him, he admitted us. He did not ask us to put anything into a signing-in book, and already I'm beginning to think, well, if these people know that Richard thinks that I wanted to kill him, why on earth are they letting me in through the door and not challenging me on identity or location? So I'm already becoming very suspicious of what's going on, because that is the first point of contact, and that establishes control for the patient. It wasn't taken.
You say that you were invited onto Finchingfield Ward. That would be you and Linda.
That's correct.
You were left there unattended while he went to look for Richard.
Yes. We entered the ward. He invited us down to the ward. At this point, I'm becoming seriously concerned, because he was marching us down to meet Richard close to his room, which means that if Richard was in his room, the first sight he will see of me is standing outside in the corridor, bearing in mind that he still thinks that I want to kill him. So that made no sense whatsoever. But it was also some of the things he started to say as we were walking down. He said, for example, that Richard had had a good night's sleep. Well, that's patent nonsense. Richard hadn't slept for weeks, and unless they gave something pretty robust, he wouldn't have done either. So that I didn't believe. He told me that the doctor was going to come in and that they'd be looking to to release Richard, which also seemed ridiculous, bearing in mind it was only 12 hours before he had been admitted for suicide. So the things he was saying just did not match the situation and seemed wholly inappropriate for the conversation that you should be having with the parents on first meeting, irrespective of whether the patient thinks that one of those parents wants to kill him.
Another point you raise in your statement, over and above what you've just told us, is that you were left at liberty to walk off and enter other patients' rooms, for example.
I could have done anything we wanted to.
And that your second son was able to enter a little later on, again without challenge.
Okay, yeah, if I can fill some of the time in between those things, but stop me if that's something you want to ask.
Well, we may come on to it. If we don't, I'll pause and you can fill in then, if that's okay.
Okay, fine.
Did your experiences of visitor security at the Linton Centre and Finchingfield Ward inform wider concerns over patient safety and, for example, the risk that patients might be able to leave the ward?
Yes. We entered without giving identification. After the events of Richard being found, which I think we'll do as we'll do that. Okay, yes. Fine. Then, when he was found, we moved back to a family room in the reception area.
Yes.
In that family room, there's big glass panels all the way around, so that you can see out, and it doesn't feel such an enclosed space. Well, fine. But it meant that we could look across and we could see the door opposite. Now,
Can we come on to this, Robert? Because I want to take this in stages to ensure that we capture everything. So,
but no, we were left unsupervised for long periods of time on two wards, the one on which Richard was and on the entrance to another ward.
Well, let's trace exactly where you and Linda were at different times. So the first thing I want to ask you is this, though. When you arrived on Finchingfield Ward, did staff know where Richard was?
No.
And I'm now going to move on to the troubling evidence about what happened to Richard. So I just want to prepare you for that.
Okay.
And I want to ask you about what happened next by reference to what you said in your statement. And you cover this from paragraph 56. After you arrived on the ward, where were you and Linda placed?
We were placed on the corridor in the Finchingfield ward, looking down towards Richard's bedroom with a clear sight of the bathroom at the far end.
Can I ask you this? Because we've been hearing some evidence last week about inpatient rooms that have ensuite bathrooms.
Yes.
If I've understood correctly, is this actually a bathroom that's separate from the bedroom?
Yes, it is. As you look down the corridor, there were rooms down either side. I think Richard was the second from the end on the right-hand side as we looked, and the bathroom was dead ahead.
So you had a good line of sight, both of the entrance to his room and, in fact, of the bathroom.
Perfect line of sight.
Thank you. You describe how the healthcare assistant who'd greeted you and Linda went to Richard's room on the right-hand side, as you described, learnt that Richard wasn't there, said he'd look in the garden, and you describe how he was also asking other members of staff if they'd seen where Richard was. Is that correct?
Yeah, having walked down on the corridor and left us in the corridor looking down, he walked down to Richard's room, come out, came back to us and said that he's not in his room, he might be in the garden, but then again he might be anywhere else. How would he know he's in the garden as opposed to any other location, was the oddity in my mind. He went out, disappeared round the garden, came back some time later, wasn't there, then walked up and down the corridor asking people if they had seen Richard. I believe another member of staff got involved, but it's very difficult to tell because the staff didn't wear any form of uniform or identification. So during the whole of that afternoon, or the hour, it seemed like a long time, but for the whole of roughly the hour and a bit that we were there, it was impossible to tell who were patients and who were staff.
But did there come a time when you heard a shout?
Yes.
You heard someone speak?
We did, yeah. That was after the healthcare assistant had come back, and it seemed that two healthcare assistants, again it's difficult to tell, were coming back asking, have you seen Richard, is he there? It was a bizarre show. It didn't look real, it looked staged, it looked wrong. And as they're coming up the corridor, there was a shout from somewhere else, and I can't tell where, that came from elsewhere, and it said, "He's in the bathroom."
In fact, in your statement, you say he's in the shower.
Oh, he's in the shower.
Do you actually recall which it was?
I think it would be the shower, because he would have asked for a shower. He very rarely bathed, he showered frequently.
What could you yourself see at this time?
At this time, we're starting to see people move around. Immediately after that, the alarm klaxon went off. People are now running in all directions, so we're half following some of what's going on, trying to work out what's happening. At the start of the process, the door down the bottom was locked, or at least it was shut, and no one was in. When we looked back down a little later on, the door was open, and we saw the door was opened, and we could see Richard's legs poking across the room.
And could you tell, was he lying on the floor as far as you could see from his legs, or was it not possible to say?
What we could see was the bottom end of his legs. If he was suspended, as we believe he was, it is feasible that he could still have been upright at that time, but we could not tell.
I understand. So what you could see was the bottom end of his legs.
Indeed.
Were you and Linda then taken to the family room that you just started to describe?
We then went to the family room after that.
Was that pretty quickly? I think you say in your statement within 30 seconds you were sent back to the family room near reception.
Yes. Can I just add something before that?
Please do,
I think
yes.
it's material to the finding, and that is while we were there, we saw two staff nurses, one male, one female, running down. And I'm not sure if they ran down before the door was opened or not. It's a very difficult time to remember, but they were running down, and I know because we saw them afterwards and recognised them as they were the two that opened the door on the second of the two groups, and we'll come on to that part of it later.
Yes, definitely. So you're back in the family room. Was it at this time that your second son joined you?
It was. He turned up at the door and he couldn't get in because there was no one manning the door.
Now, if I've understood the geography correctly, when you're in the family room, you can't see Richard's room or the bathroom or anything?
No, you're around a corner by that time, and there's a sort of little chicane in the corridor that would have blocked that.
But you do describe, paragraph 60, what you could see from the family room. You describe a squabble between staff and visitors.
Yes.
Now, was that squabble anything to do, as far as you're aware, with Richard, or is it something completely removed?
Nothing to do with Richard.
And you also describe a paramedic with an oxygen bottle unable to re-enter the ward because no staff were available to open the door.
Yeah, one of the things that really surprised me is from my time in the Navy, we practice emergency situations again and again and again, and at any time of day, someone knew that they had to man a particular location and do a particular set of tasks in relation to that emergency. And it started with for exercise, and it happened every single day. What I couldn't understand is, bearing in mind that they're almost certainly going to get an emergency, and in an emergency situation they're going to have to control the door, why no one was posted on it. In fact, I can't find any record anywhere of anyone saying what their specific job was in any form of emergency.
So this issue about an inadequate emergency, let me just make sure I understand. One of the issues that arises is of an inadequate emergency response. Is that correct?
I think it's closer to absent.
Absent emergency response, Thank you. Now, during the time that this is all happening, to what extent are you and Linda and your second son being kept informed?
All right. Completing the part of getting in, he only managed to get in when I approached a... No, that was another point. He only managed to get in when someone else wanted to leave. That person left and just walked in beside them, and the member of staff didn't challenge him at all. He didn't present identification and he didn't sign any book.
Classic tailgating.
Pardon?
Classic tailgating.
Yes. Yeah. Just walked through. And that was it.
Were you and Linda and your second son then moved to some seats in a corridor?
We were, but there are some important issues that happened between those 2 points in time.
Of course.
Shall I cover them
Yes,
now?
please.
Okay. We were in the family room and we were given a cup of tea, seems reasonable, and an apple. The apple seems rather odd, but bearing in mind the shock we'd had, we ate the apple for the sugar to try and keep ourselves going. And if they had done that with foresight, then well done for the person that did that. We sat there, we asked for some sort of help, we were given no information. We were told at one point that they'd caught Richard in time. What we didn't understand in that, and I don't think the person understood when they said it, was they called him in time, he had had a heart attack, so his heart had stopped, they'd got his heart going. What they didn't tell us was it was so long later that the delay had destroyed his brain. So, but I think we'll cover a little bit more on that in your question. So we're now wondering what will happen. So we're pressing for a senior nurse to come and visit us. Finally, a nurse turned up. The gentleman sat down and he put his hand over the front of his face in this fashion, and having put it over his face, he proceeded to mumble. And he mumbled and used words in a bizarre Eastern European Italian accent. I couldn't understand a word he said. He wouldn't repeat anything that he said, but the only two words we understood were choke and cord. And that's all we understood, and that is the extent of the information that we were given on Finchinfield Ward. We were then moved...
To the corridor.
Sorry, to complete your question now,
yes.
I didn't want that part missed out. We were then moved from the family room around a corner on the basis that they were clearing the area so that they could move Richard out. What they didn't tell us was the condition Richard was in. Nothing prepared us for that.
But did you learn that he'd been taken to A&E?
Yes, we did.
Okay, we're going to come on to A&E, but before we do, I'd like to look at part of your statement, please.
Yeah.
Could you put up the statement at page 12? This is HJA 007 877 at page 12, and expand 3 at the bottom. Thank you. You've touched on this already, but I think it's helpful to look at the slightly more detailed version of what you say in your statement. Yeah. Throughout the time that we occupied the family room, and during emergency conditions, the main entrance wasn't manned. And as we've heard, at one point a paramedic with an oxygen cylinder was unable to enter until I demanded a member of staff that the paramedic be. Would you mind going over the page? Admitted. Throughout the emergency, there was an air of panic. Yep. And this is reflected in the serious incident investigation report. It gave the appearance of the unpreparedness that comes from the lack of exercise and drills necessary to an effective emergency response. Now, is that what you were referring to earlier on?
It is. That's what I led into there. This led to the point where at one stage, one of the emergency team that had been called in ambulances had been let out, gone and got an oxygen bottle, and was standing with the oxygen bottle outside the door trying to get in. And the only way that that person got in was because I walked across to the dining room where there was a member of staff, at least I hope it was, there was a member of staff standing there, and I made it plain to them that they needed to go over to the door and let the person in because my son is in serious condition down the corridor. And that's the only way that that even happened.
Thank you. Can we read the next paragraph, 51? You say here the witness statement of the on-call doctor or paramedic states that the paddles of the defibrillator were on the wrong way, meaning that the initial attempts to restart Richard's heart, and you've mentioned this, he was in cardiac arrest, served no purpose, and some of the most valuable recovery time lost.
Yes.
Could you take that down, please? But is this, again, all part of the nature of the emergency response in relation to Richard?
Well, yes. If you're using a piece of equipment and you're doing it in a relaxed manner, and you can just pick it up and you put it together and you take your time. It's easy to do. You can follow the instructions, it's not difficult. But if you then put that same person under severe pressure, whether it's a real situation or not, so you bring in some form of simulated stress, that person won't be able to do it that easily. But you'll only do that when you've built up the muscle memory of having done it repeatedly, time and time again, and under as close conditions as you can to the stressful ones you'll find when you have a patient in cardiac arrest before you.
So this comes back to the point about training and, in fact, also drilling to make sure that, come an emergency, you're ready and able to deal with that, if any eventuality.
Indeed, whatever training they did, if it was on their policies or whatever, was of no value whatsoever in a situation like this. And I think I've alluded on a previous answer that the training had no benefit then either.
And I'm going to just ask, I'm going to read from paragraph 227 of your statement, because that's also relevant here. You say, after Richard was found, we witnessed one member of staff, and one member of staff only, who seemed to know what they were doing. And was that a ward manager? Was that a ward manager?
I think that would be the role that that person had at the time.
You say the remainder of what we saw ranged from poor to appalling.
Yep.
The documentation available to us provides us with no comfort, as it displays no warmth towards Richard at his time of need. And you say this at paragraph 228, the disparities in professionalism, competence and compassion between Finchingfield Ward in the Linden Centre and A&E and the ICU in Broomfield Hospital, where Richard was nursed until his death, could not have been more stark.
Yeah.
That was your experience?
And if I could just add to that.
Yes.
If I pick up on the question that you asked me previously, Chair, about what would I have done, I would have liked to have seen the quality and the professionalism of the ICU staff in the Linden Centre. If they could match 1/10 of what those people had, my son would still be with us today.
You explain in your main statement that Richard was found unconscious with a ligature around his neck in the bathroom on Finchingfield Ward.
Yeah.
Did you subsequently learn that he must have ligatured using pipework in the bathroom in what you regard as a foreseeably dangerous location?
Yes, we did. We were not told that he had ligatured himself completely. All we heard was cord and choke. That's all we knew when we left the Linden Centre itself. So we picked this up in police investigations and other investigations as it goes along. Now, the ligature itself, the first time we were told it was a ligature was in the A&E department over in the hospital. And do you want me to go there?
We'll come on to that in a moment.
We'll come to that in a moment. Okay. So, it was a ligature that we were subsequently told.
Okay, you make this point at paragraph 198 of your statement, that Richard did hang himself, and that conclusion is important. So let's just remember, this is mid-May 2015. And that conclusion is important because in February 2015, just 3 months before Richard, another gentleman took his own life by hanging in the very same room as Richard.
Correct. In February of that year, a gentleman hanged himself on a separate ligature point in the bathroom. When Richard used it, you've mentioned pipework, and so I'll use that term, and it's absolutely obvious that the pipework, you cannot miss it. A few things suggest that Richard hanged himself and didn't just self-ligature. The first of them is that the autopsy report, the pathologist, on 3 separate occasions mentions that the wounds and the marks and the lesions on Richard and the type of death and the damage done to him was caused more than likely by he used the term consistent with hanging rather than self-ligature. He points out that self-ligature is extremely difficult anyway. The next part of the evidence is that on pipework itself, the damage that was done would have been consistent with Richard hanging himself and consistent with nothing else in the way that it's broken. And the point that finally convinced me on this was when I did something the police and the trust never did, and that's elicit from an eyewitness that Richard was in fact connected to the pipe, and I know who undid the knot, and I know how the pipework become broken.
So 2 points. One is the evidence, when you put it all together, indicates that he hanged himself.
Yes.
And the other is that this was coming not long after another gentleman, as you put it, had also hanged himself in the same bathroom.
Well, yes, and after that, the CQC, which I guess we'll also cover...
We'll touch on that briefly.
Did an investigation. That would have triggered, and we had the discussion with the Trust on the 5th of August, that there should have been some repairs made. The pipework itself was still there when we returned to meet with the Trust on the 5th of August. We were taken down to the room.
We'll come on to that in a moment as well. I'm going to move on now, Robert, to the A&E and the ICU. Before I do, is there anything else that you would like to raise about this very difficult piece of evidence we've just
I think you pulled on the leash on several occasions.
Okay.
We'll cover those when we get there.
So A&E at Broomfield Hospital.
Yep.
You describe in your main statement, this is from paragraph 64, arriving at A&E and going to the family room there. Now, what happened whilst you were in the family room?
Okay. The three of us left the Linden Centre in 2 cars. We drove over to the car park, pulled over into the hospital, up to the desk to find out what's going on. They knew that Richard was there. We gave reasonable identification, and they directed us towards the family room so that we could wait there whilst we're waiting for some news of Richard. In there were already 2 people. There were 2 ladies. One sat in the corner wearing black, and another one sat here. I believe it was a blue dress that she was wearing.
Did you say you said a blue dress?
Yeah,
yes,
I believe it was blue. And she was sat with her hands on her thighs, like someone waiting for an interview, which struck me as an odd way to sit in A&E if you're waiting to find out the condition of a loved one. But that didn't do much. We started talking, and it bothered, and we were really trying to struggle to understand what had happened to Richard. We'd been given so little. Clearly, the lady in the corner, dressed in black, clearly recognised that our circumstance was somewhat uncomfortable, or we had made her feel uncomfortable. I don't know what it is, but she had the common sense and the politeness to leave the room to us so that we could deal with the troubles that we had. But the other lady stayed, and she didn't say or do anything. She just sat there, and we talked, and we tried to rationalise what was going on. And then it dawned on me that she still hasn't moved. She was like a statue, sat with her hands on her thighs. So I asked her who she was. At this point, she said that she was from the Linden Centre. Well, if she's from the Linden Centre and she's come over about Richard, we're going to want to know what happened. So we started pressurising her with questions. In that, at one point, we told her we didn't know how she died. So she demonstrated how she had been told, because we found out that she hadn't been in on the morning. She only turned up in the afternoon after Richard had hanged himself.
Did she inform you that Richard had choked himself using a cord?
Yes.
But did she also demonstrate it? And did she demonstrate it in significant and graphic detail?
Together with facial expressions, yes.
Thank you. What was your reaction to what she said and to the demonstration that she gave?
Utter horror.
Did you also speak with an A&E doctor?
Yes, we did.
Did he inform you of the seriousness of Richard's condition?
Yes, he did. He told us that Richard had severe brain damage, and it was most unlikely that there was any chance of a recovery.
Was Richard transferred to the intensive care unit?
He was.
you explain in your main statement, and this is, you say this, paragraph 69, at ICU, the full extent of Richard's injuries were revealed to us. The extent of those injuries was such that they provoked a senior ICU charge nurse to issue a safeguarding report for the first time in his career.
Correct.
Correct?
Yes. He was so upset by what he saw. There is one point I'd like to make about the A&E waiting room, but I think we'll deal with this and then go back. Richard had hanged himself, and the ligature had completely closed off the blood to his brain.
Can I just say this, Robert? There will be a variety of people watching and listening to this evidence. So whilst it's very important that you're able to give a true account, can I also ask you to do so with some care, just with an awareness of people who may be listening?
Let me express it this way then. I'm a fairly robust person, but when I walked in to see Richard, I couldn't last more than a matter of seconds before I had to walk out.
I'm so sorry.
And that was true of everyone that came. We warned them of the condition that he was in. The state that he was in was nothing representative of the person that went into care the day before. And it was that state that provoked the charge nurse to write the document. His work colleagues would turn up, and we advised them of Richard's condition, and they were running out crying at what they saw. It was truly a horrible thing that happened to him.
I'm very sorry to hear that. Robert, you said there was another matter that you wanted to refer to whilst you're in the family room.
Yes, there was. Bits of this may come up elsewhere, but this is a link, I think, that's important, and it sets the scene of maybe the mindset of the trust that day. The healthcare assistant wrote 3 statements.
Is this the healthcare assistant from the Linden Centre?
They're in the A&E.
Oh, in the A&E, thank you.
She wrote 3 statements. The first of which was in May, so this is dated on the day of the incident itself, and her going on to the A&E. Now, she came over to the A&E, and the trust supposedly sent her over for our care. Now, I challenged the trust on this, and after challenging many times and discounting their arguments all the way through, if she was sent over to care for us, I would have thought she'd announce herself to us. But this is from the Associate Director of Quality, who's on the list over there, and that particular person accepted, I know the member of staff didn't identify who she was, and this again is something that we'd have expected to occur. From that, they wouldn't meet with us allow us to meet her or get anything else from her. Now, on her 3 statements, that supposedly she's there for us, her first statement, all about us for the most part, runs onto 3 pages. If you look at the evidence of what's written down of what Richard said in the hospital, it amounts to 2 half lines. Now, in mental health, it would seem to me that the only thing that you've got, you haven't got stethoscopes, you haven't got blood pressure meters, none of these things, apart from their physical health, are relevant necessarily to their mental health. The main way that you can see what happens to the patients is 1, by how they act, and 2, by what they say. And those records are absolutely critical to developing the picture of the patient. In 12 hours, 2 half lines.
So do you think
in a matter of minutes, 3 pages.
You think their focus was not in the right area?
I will say exactly where their focus was. And if I may, I just need to get the right person on here. Yeah. This is when the lady has returned back over to the Linden Centre. This information was fed back to the team, including the operations director. What difference to Richard's health did knowing about us make to the Linden Centre? He was already beyond help and destined to die just 4 days later. So why start finding out about us for someone that was supposedly there for our care and didn't even tell us?
Thank you. I want to look at a brief chronology, please, just to take stock. The Suffolk Mental Health Crisis team attended outside your home on the evening of Saturday, the 16th of May, 2015.
Yes.
Richard was admitted to Finchingfield Ward at the Linden Centre in the very early hours of Sunday, the 17th of May. He was taken to A&E. Was that sort of later on the Sunday?
That was about somewhere coming up to 1 o'clock. I think he moved over to the A&E. So it was 12 hours to the point of the incident, and then we left at just coming round about the 1 o'clock time, and he had already gone by that time just before. So the whole of all of these incidents had taken place in a compressed period of time, yes.
He was transferred to ICU.
Yes, he was.
And tragically, Richard died on the 21st of May, which was a Thursday, I believe.
Yes, he did.
So this is all happening within a condensed period of time in terms of his time on the ward, but also just over a matter of a few days.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm going to move on now, Robert, to the meeting in August, the 5th of August.
Yeah.
Before I do, can I just check, is there anything else you'd like to raise at this time?
No, I think the points have come out on that part there.
Good. So moving now to the 5th of August 2015, you attended a meeting with NEPT, is that correct?
That's correct.
You refer to this meeting in your statement from paragraph 113. What was the purpose of the meeting from your perspective?
We had a whole bunch of questions that were unanswered. Very much the area that the inquiry's around at the moment.
Who attended from the family?
Beg pardon?
Who attended from the family?
My wife and I.
You describe at paragraph 116 that the following attended from the Trust: the Deputy Director of Nursing, the Operations Director at the Linden Centre, and the charge nurse who'd been also been present on the 17th of May.
Yeah.
Now, where did this meeting take place?
In the Linden Centre.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
Were you surprised about the location for the meeting, namely the place where Richard had been able to ligature, or did that seem appropriate to you?
I would say by this stage I was beyond surprise. I don't think there was... I reached a point in dealing with the Trust where worrying about things such as tact really didn't matter anymore, and I was more concerned with fact than place.
During that meeting, were you escorted to the bathroom where Richard had ligatured?
We were.
You say this at paragraph 117. When the charge nurse escorted us to the bathroom, we passed through a locked door.
Yes.
On the other side of the door, a patient was sat on the floor.
Yes.
To our amazement, the charge nurse stepped over her, and then when we entered the bathroom, we were shocked to see the pipework repaired, but not enclosed. And I think you touched on that earlier.
Yes.
What did you think, putting the charge nurse stepping over a patient to one side, what did you think about the fact that the pipework had been repaired but remained unenclosed?
Madness. I cannot think why you would want to do that. Following the death in February, they changed the ligature point then. But on this occasion, there's a ligature point, and you look at it, you can't miss it. It's there. It's one of the first things you see when you open the door, and it was there, and it was repaired.
And this is in the context, as you tell us, of a gentleman who had in February died in the same bathroom.
By the same method, yeah.
You say in your statement, this is paragraph 115, that during the meeting with the Trust, you found out that the trust did not have a separate ligature policy,
No.
that patients were left with belts and cords, i.e. ligatures, for their dignity, despite this being contrary to their search policy.
Yeah, that puzzled me particularly. The argument was that one of the important things for patients was their dignity. I asked the question, to which again I didn't get an answer, and that is, what is the dignity of dying on a toilet floor? So I think that just puts in stark contrast. But on that point of ligatures, while I was talking to the Deputy Director of Nursing there, she was wholly obsessed with the concept of ligature points, which seems bizarre, bearing in mind they repaired one, but she was wholly concerned with those. And if the ligature points were sold, it wouldn't happen, despite the fact the Trust is trying to make the case that my son self-ligatured and didn't use a ligature point. She looked absolutely bamboozled when I pointed out that the only common thing in a strangulation, be it a hanging or self-ligature, is the ligature, not the ligature point. And it was like no one had ever explained that to her or thought. Her mind was so linear in her thinking. I don't think she was an uncaring woman. I don't think she was an unintelligent. In fact, I think she was very bright, and I thought she spoke with sincerity when she tried to comfort us, and I don't think otherwise. But like the rest of the Trust, it's this linearity of thinking. It's a laser beam straight ahead, nothing to the periphery.
You add, amongst the things that you learnt during this meeting, was that the Trust representatives did not know if by policy the bathroom door behind which Richard hanged himself was supposed to be kept locked or left open.
No, they didn't know. Sorry, can I just go back a bit? The lady behind the door, and the door is important because that door was locked the day we went there on the 5th of August, but on the 17th of May the door was open because we never went through a locked door on that occasion. The poor lady on the other side, she was in a terrible mess, the poor lady. It really was sad to see. She was trying to roll a cigarette, her hands, she was having difficulty doing it, and get the bits together to have a smoke. It was just sad to see. That shouldn't happen. There should be more dignity for people.
The 72-hour report addresses bathroom doors, and you say this in your statement, it's paragraph 123, that one of the two recommendations was that inpatient bathroom doors be kept locked until required for use.
Mm-hmm. Yes. If there's reasonable separation between toilets and bathrooms, then and the toilets are properly constructed such that they're safe, or even a novel idea of someone on level 2, if they've got suicide in their record, have someone with them whilst they're separated out. But they're managing it all wrong there.
You've touched on this about the bathroom door being opened twice during.
Yes.
Can I come to that now, please?
Yes.
You have concluded that staff opened the bathroom door on Finchingfield ward twice on the 17th of May. This is paragraph 175 of your statement onwards. You refer to two different scenarios, each with two members of staff arriving to find the bathroom door locked. One member of each group unlocks the door is opened, and Richard is found on the floor. And you note that the SIIR could not answer the question of which of the two groups of staff opened the door, and that the possibility that the door was in fact opened twice was expressly raised and acknowledged at Richard's inquest.
Yes.
And your own conclusion, as I've just mentioned, is that the door was opened twice, once by each group of staff. Yes. This is what you say at paragraph 186. Mm-hmm. If true, this means that Richard was found, then left alone with a ligature around his neck, and the door locked on him. Now, have I correctly summarised that particular point?
Yes, you have. When we were met going into the hospital, I told you that the behaviour of the person was bizarre. He was saying things that you wouldn't say in that circumstance. So for some reason, he was off a normal script. It didn't make sense why at the time, but he was not speaking as someone should speak to you. Then, when we went over to the hospital at a later point and everything had gone through, my son and I talked that through, and the only thing that seemed to make any sense of all the scenarios that could be was that he must have known Richard's condition to have behaved in such a bizarre manner and said such odd things that patently weren't true. So we put it as a strong possibility that the door was opened twice. Now, I can't imagine in any way, shape or form that you can confuse yourself whether you unlock and open a door and find someone hanging themselves on the other side of it. I don't know how you can make that mistake. My personal experience of life is, of all of the things I've been involved in that really impress them on your mind, I can see them quite clearly, and I could call some of them up now as I speak. They're there, they don't go away. And yet somehow this completely false memory of opening a door and finding someone hanging behind it has arisen in their head. But then you'd have to do it to one or other of the groups. Well, what about if neither of them have got that wrong? What if they've both got it right? They did open the door. If you look at the evidence and the descriptions that they give, when I finally got hold of the statements and I was able to examine them, it only reconfirmed that for me. Early in the process, we got involved with, I think it was Channel 5 News, but we got involved with a news company as we tried to get some traction to having our story listened to and heard. And two young ladies turned up, and the two of them were as sharp as razors. They really were, as bright as buttons. I gave them the evidence, stepped back, and left them to have a read. After a relatively short period of time in relation to the evidence they needed to read, they had a short conversation. One looked at me and said, "You do realise the door was open twice," without me telling them. And the answer, I believe, was yes. There's even a YouTube video of that still on the internet. Then at the inquest, as the evidence was being given, one of the members of the jury, most likely the chairman speaking on behalf of the others, asked the question, "Does that mean that the door was open twice?" And the coroner said that's where the evidence seems to point. And that seemed to be sufficient, and the whole thing just cruised on past. Now, if it was open twice, that means that Richard was found hanging, and not only found hanging, but left hanging, because I know the second group were the ones that undid the ligature and removed it from the ligature point.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to a new area, Robert. Before I do, is there anything else you'd like to say about what we've covered so far?
There are a couple of points I think I'd like to raise, and that is the trust. Everything was delayed in terms of the generation of the reports and when they were written. The 72-hour report should have been written in 72 hours. We've already covered on that. The report itself comes up, and it seems to suggest that it was written within the 72 hours, but then never made any distribution. What I cannot understand is this, that if they had written the report in May, by the 20th, as it's written here, why, when we met in August, did the gentleman sat to my left, who was the operations manager, not mention it? I would have thought he would have done, because one of the people that was signatory to it, as I understand it, worked in that department, so he would have known about this report.
And you've explained already that the first you heard of the 72-hour report was some significant time later.
Oh, it was. It came much, much later. But the gentleman I was speaking to, who was the assistant quality director, I think I used the term earlier, I can't understand why he hadn't seen it till the September. So all of that I find very troubling around the report itself. There was one other point I wanted to make.
Well, we may
that.
pick it up because we're going to move now to address investigations. And as I said, at the end, I will pause just to let you regroup and consider if there's anything.
Sorry, I do have the point, if I may. If you read the report, it's very scant. If you read the instructions on the back page, they're quite specific. Nothing was done according to the requirement. Sorry, that was the point I wanted to make.
Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Understood. So you describe in your statement the long road to this inquiry, basically, and the various investigations that have taken place along the way. We've just discussed the investigation that led to the 72-hour report and matters surrounding that. There was also, as we've heard, a serious incident investigation report. You have fundamental concerns about the SIIR, which you detail in your statement. And you say this is paragraph 126, I have profound concerns regarding almost all of the contents of the SIIR of December 2015, as demonstrated in my response in January 2016. And you, amongst the concerns that you raise in your statement are that its independence was compromised by the fact that it was conducted by a nurse at the same trust.
Indeed. On that one, the report itself was written by, I'll try to get the right name for you here, the right...
we can refer to this person as the author of the SIR.
Okay, the author of the SIR was, in the conversation that we first had with the Trust on being involved in it, was presented to us, and without saying as much, it was very much that he's independent of the Linden Centre. Well, he was independent of the Linden Centre insofar as he worked in the western area of the Trust. Now, given his job title, it's most likely that he either reported directly to the Director of Nursing, who sat on the board, or through no more than one other to have a title such as his. But what really troubles me about that is not just that he did it, but it was in contravention, as I would understand it, to the serious incident framework published by NHS England, which controlled those matters at the time. And in that framework, towards the back here, it clearly states, an independent investigation should be considered for the following circumstances, that is independent wholly of the Trust. A serious incident where the organisation is unable to conduct an effective, objective, timely and proportionate. This particularly relevant incidents where the obligation of the authorities to account for the treatment of the individual is particularly stringent, including, well, I think we come nicely under that. Deaths and near deaths resulting in severe harm. So we've qualified for that one. Of those detained under the mental health and in certain circumstances, the deaths of informal psychiatric inpatients. Where? So these are the conditions that will now cover the admission basis of Richard. The cause of death is unknown. Well, it was known, it just wasn't correctly communicated. Where there is reason to believe that death may have been avoidable. Well, we do know it's avoidable because in the very first letter that we received from the CEO of the Trust, he stated that he was saddened because Richard's death was avoidable. So we clearly qualify for that. Or unexpected, i.e. not caused by the natural cause of the patient's illness and underlying medical conditions when this is managed in line with best practice.
So is the short point that the policy is clear that the conducting of an SIIR by someone from the same trust is clearly in breach of it?
Yes.
You go on, and we'll look at this later, but you go on to make a recommendation specifically addressing this point, don't you?
Yes, I do, that no trust should ever be allowed to do an investigation of this nature into itself. They're marking their own homework, and we all know where that leads in the end.
Yes.
And just to be absolutely clear, because I know that on occasions organisations will do an one themselves in order to get it done quickly, and will then employ somebody independent to do an investigation. And so far as you're aware, no independent investigation was undertaken.
It was presented to us as if there was some sort of separate independent investigation, in that someone would then be looking through all the documents to go through it, but that turned out to be an editing service, as I understand it.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on, you refer in your main statement to 2 CQC Care Quality Commission investigations, one that had been launched in February 2015 into the death that we've already discussed, and another into Richard's death. And you raised concerns that the CQC investigation into Richard's death, concerning that. Was it that one of the investigations was quite focused on the death? And was it in Richard's case, it was a much wider investigation? Was that one of the concerns?
Yeah, I'll express it slightly differently if I may.
Yes,
the CQC doesn't do investigations into deaths. That's the responsibility of other bodies. But what they can do is look into whatever detail they like in the way that a particular hospital or trust is managed. Now, on the first of the investigations, that's the one that followed from the death in February, they did a relatively detailed look into the trust and into the area where the gentleman died, and having done that, they came up with a report with some fairly strong recommendations. In Richard's case, bearing in mind that we're now back in the same room with the same cause of death, with a ligature point that should have been repaired at the time of the other one, and when I asked for a list of the repairs that should have been done, I was told that the list had been lost, like many other documents. In that situation, what the CQC did was they looked broadly across the trust when they had a clear problem right under their nose, and that I don't understand.
There was another element in that communications between the CQC team and yourself were poor, as you describe it. Mm-hmm. That led to a complaint. And in summary, Robert, whilst you were unhappy with the CQC investigation, you were more happy with the way your complaint was addressed. Is that correct?
Yes, I was. If I could just pad that out.
Do it briefly, because we've got a little bit more ground that we need to cover. So please do.
Okay, I'll put this one very briefly.
Yes.
The report that the CQC came up with was a very powerful document, and it is the only document that I've seen so far where a public institution has had the courage to be honest about its own failings and how it's going to deal with them. And in that sense, I think it's a very good report. What they've written doesn't make good reading, but for my story of how I got here, it was a seminal part in gaining access and ending up here today. So it did have a benefit.
Can we be clear that the report that you're talking about is the report following your complaint?
Yes.
It's not a report addressing matters at the trust. This is addressing failures in relation to the way the CQC had conducted the investigation.
Yes, that's
Thank
correct.
you very much. And as you say, the honest approach in that report was of significance to you.
Yes, I'll put it really simply, and that is, if I'd had the same degree of honesty and integrity in the other reports that have been written before that, from my point of view, much of this wouldn't have happened this way. It would have taken a very different course.
Thank you. You tell us also about Richard's inquest, mm-hmm. which took place after some delay. Yeah. Did you privately fund a barrister for the inquest?
Yes, I did.
You make 2 observations about the inquest process. I want to make sure I've understood them. This is paragraph 214. In essence, were you concerned that there was a large bundle of documents put together for the inquest, but insufficient time allocated actually to deal with all of them?
Yes, if you take a full ring binder, they filled 4 of them. Reading that amount of documentation and understanding it is impossible. The barrister, we employed 2 barristers, one in sequence. Be blunt about what the first one did. She waited until it was almost too late, and then she gazumped us by putting her prices up at the very last moment. We employed another barrister, and I will take my hat off to the gentleman. He got full control of the facts of the matter in the limited time that he had, but he didn't manage to get to the point of the linkages between them. He didn't have sufficient time for that, so he and I had to work at that during the inquest itself.
You've previously, I think maybe in September, you explained the toll that this long path to this inquiry has taken on you. Mm-hmm. Is this an aspect of that, having to brief a barrister very much at the last minute in relation to matters that must have been of great concern and worry?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Do you also note in your statement that there are many deaths in the scope of this inquiry that will have passed the desk of the Essex coroner? And do you say in your statement it's difficult to understand how this pattern was not noticed, and if noticed, not acted upon?
Well, yes. There's one central coroner's office in Essex, and it's in Chelmsford. This inquiry started out with Chair mentioning the 2,000 deaths that formed the basis of the start of the investigation that's here. Many of those deaths must have passed across because they weren't natural deaths, so they must have passed across the desk of the coroner. That's their job, to monitor those. If that happened over 20 years at 2,000 deaths, that's 2 deaths per week. I don't know how you can't notice a pattern. They've then issued on many of those preventions of future deaths that have done absolutely nothing to change anything, and yet the process carries on. And I don't understand why.
Thank you. We've touched on one of 2 police investigations. Can we deal with those briefly? First of all, there was a corporate manslaughter investigation conducted in 2015 by Essex Police. Is it right that you enjoyed a good relationship with the detective inspector who was running that investigation?
Excellent relationship. He was a very slow, methodical man, worked his way through the facts. What I did notice was that as his investigation went on and started to get closer to the truth, then he seemed to have fewer and fewer resources at his disposal. And towards the end, it seemed to be a side project that he was doing. He managed to get to the point to pass charging advice to the CQC, which I thought was a sterling effort. And we were able to debate points quite strongly and see where the merit of the arguments were, and those I won went into the evidence, and those that I lost, they didn't. And I think that's good, and I think that's how it should be.
Am I right in thinking that this investigation didn't lead to any criminal charges or proceedings?
No, it didn't. What happened there was we got the CQC didn't approve the charges. On the first one, if I remember correctly, it was on the basis that they believed that the seminal part of the evidence for them was that the search was done, I think they called it professionally, it was done properly, which seems strange given that the trust had settled out of court on that very same point. So I couldn't understand. So I complained and I wrote an analysis of where I thought their faults were. They didn't send me the analysis, their response to that, until just before Richard's inquest. And then after the inquest, the police announced that they were going to do a second manslaughter, but on a much broader basis than the one they'd done before.
So this is 2017
That's
by
right.
Kent and Essex Police. I think you mentioned earlier that he was a detective chief inspector who was leading on that.
Yes.
Were the crimes to be addressed corporate manslaughter, gross negligence manslaughter, and all other incidental crimes as you described them in your
That's
statement?
what he said to us at a meeting at the I think it was the sports club or some sort of a club area at the central Essex police station.
Were families told that the investigation would leave no stone unturned?
Yes, it was.
What was the working relationship like with the family during this second investigation?
There wasn't one of any meaning.
You say you describe it in your statement as there being no meaningful communication.
That's correct. The only communication that we had is we had one interview of about an hour, but that wasn't into corporate manslaughter, that was into any other criminal charges that we thought might be relevant. We gave the police documentation to support those other charges. Early in the following year, my wife received an email just saying that they were no longer going to pursue any other charges. At no point was I ever interviewed about or gave them evidence of corporate manslaughter.
Thank you. You've already mentioned that you brought a civil action against NEPT, which was settled.
Yes.
Are you also referring in your main statement to working with your local MP,
Yes,
James Cartledge at the time?
that is correct.
You say that his support has been, as you say, invaluable.
Correct.
Did he secure a debate in the House of Commons about Richard's case?
Yes, he did.
Did that in turn secure an independent inquiry into Richard's death?
It did.
Does that bring us then to the Essex Mental Health Independent Inquiry?
One more step.
Yes, tell me.
And that is, having had the independent inquiry offered, offered to us, it was then broadened out to other people, and the families had to choose their route from there. My view at that point was, given all of the impediments that the state, for want of a broader term, had put in front of us, that if we didn't cooperate with that, then what we'd end up with is continually being told, but you were offered. That having decided not to go down that route, I pressurised the minister, or spoke to the minister more accurately, and received from her a statement that effectively said that the reasons why there couldn't be a public inquiry into Richard's death was because, one, public inquiries are normally about groups. That's not totally true. They can be done on individuals. And secondly, there was no evidence of systemic failure.
What was the name of the minister? Do you recall?
Sorry,
What was the name of the minister?
that was Nadine Dorries.
Nadine Dorries, thank you. That does bring us a grouping of different cases to be considered by the Essex Mental Health.
And it was the failure of the Essex Mental Health on those two bounds that left the minister nowhere else to go but to capitulate to all of the other pressures that had been placed upon him.
And that led us to here and to today, you
Yes.
sitting, giving evidence to the chair.
Yes.
Robert, I'm going to move to cover your recommendations next.
Yep.
Before I do, is there anything further you'd like to say about the route to your evidence today and to the Lampard Inquiry?
No, I think I brought back all of the things I'd like to raise all the way through. Thank you.
Could you put up, please, the recommendations HJA 009990? I think we've covered the first one, but may I read it out anyway? The Trust must never again manage a serious incident investigation into either a death or near miss occurring within itself, instead being managed by a different trust with independent legal oversight, nominated by and reporting to the victim's next of kin. Now, I think we've covered that, but is there anything else you'd like to say about that now?
Yes, I think it's a matter of not allowing that to grow too far and therefore swamping the system. And I think we got very close to this on a point that to a question you asked me earlier, Chair. That is that this needs to stick at the very top of the triangle, because as you come away from the top of the serious incidents, the number of lesser incidents will grow massively on the way down. The idea is not to clog the system up, but to remove the ability of a trust to write an SIIR that then forms, as it has done, the centrepiece of what happened at the inquest, what happened at the first police and the second police investigation, and forms part of what the CQC would look at. And so they should not be managing that document. And then to make sure that it's managed, the oversight that's given to the whole thing should be a route back to the family so that they can press the alarm bell when thing is going off and intercept things that are being done that are incorrect.
Thank you, that's very clear. Can we see 2 further recommendations? The Trust redesign its entire care delivery service by using safety cases within a patient safety doctrine, as outlined in the attached proposal, and the CQC and coroner develop mechanisms to track and report a range of performance data relating to the patient safety doctrine for mental health care. Now, I think both of those take us to the doctrine, and unless there's anything you'd like to say at this stage, what I propose to do is now to move on to discuss your doctrine.
Okay.
Could you take that down, please? Could you put up the doctrine? This is HJA 010168, and could you expand up to and including the first paragraph of the introduction? Thank you very much. So do we see here the title, Proposal for a National Health Service, Mental Health, Patient Safety Doctrine? Now, this proposal was written by you with the assistance of ChatGPT.
Yes.
And does it say this, that it aims to provoke a structured discussion on the formulation, validation, and rollout of a patient safety doctrine for mental health patients in the United Kingdom? The Lampard Inquiry is considering a significant number of deaths over an extended time period. This proposal hypothesises that the relevant mental health model care has systemically failed and is incapable of self-correction and should be replaced by rapid evolution into a radical solution. So just to make sure I've understood, please, is the starting point of your doctrine, therefore, that the current approach is not working and cannot be made to work?
Yes. May I expand on that?
Please do.
Yeah. I've already covered the number of deaths, and I've already covered the fact that they passed through the coroner and they've led to a whole number of prevention of future deaths, none of which has changed anything. At the beginning of our investigations into all of the things that have happened, the senior medical doctor within the Trust stated, and I think it was in one of the minutes of the Trust board itself, that he could find no pattern within the deaths that happened. And my second son said that's because there is no pattern, it's random. What they're managing is so thin that deaths could take place anywhere and you can't see them. But I believe it is possible to see it and why these things happen. I've missed out some of the things. It would have gone a little bit too far in detail, but I will cover them now and how I arrived at going into this. If you look, my wife loves a good murder mystery, and in a good murder mystery, it always boils down to the clever interpretation of means, motive and opportunity. Let's have a look at those three in the case of Richard. In the case of Richard, the motive was suicidal ideation. The means was the dressing gown cord that he used, that he was left with, and the opportunity was being left in the bathroom, which broke the protection of the level 2 rounds. If you want to stop anyone taking their own life, then you have to remove and make sure the combination of those, or certainly 2 of them, never happen. You don't let them go together. And what can you use to prevent them coming together? Well, you need some form of safety process that goes round it. The National Rifle Association has one, and this other stuff I've been reading, the background to this has one, that's their safety practice. And it's safe people using safe equipment with safe processes in safe places. And I can't think of anything that doesn't fit better here than patients, or people, which are the patients and the caring staff, the property, which is what the patients have, in this case the ligatures, the scissors and all the other items, and then what the staff have that you need to deny them access to. A complete rethink on the policies and the way that you can read them and understand them, and the places that they're in being made as possible, safe as possible, or if there are things you can't do, you manage these other factors such that those 3 items that the means, motive and opportunity never come together. So this is by no means meant to be a full and complete document. It is just that. It's a way to start the discussion, to come up with a better way of doing things. Because if you map out the 2,000 deaths in any space, you will always find that it's lights coming on in 2 or 3 locations of how people died, never one. And that's why that chief doctor couldn't find any pattern within them.
Can we just look at the rest of the introduction there, because that picks up on what you've said a little bit and provides a little bit more information about the background to this document. This proposal adapts the structured processes of military doctrine development into the area of national mental health policy. Now, you mentioned earlier in your evidence that you were in the Navy, is that right?
That's correct.
Are you therefore drawing in part on your own experience, past experience in the military?
In part on that, in part from management positions I've held and the rest of my life, and the things I read, yes.
And in fact, elsewhere in this document, you refer to other areas that you've drawn on, for example, the nuclear industry and the aviation industry.
Yes.
So industries or areas that have to deal with high-risk situations. While the military doctrine often incorporates obfuscation and deception at strategic, operational and tactical level, this report deliberately excludes such elements. Instead, it emphasises transparency, ethics, trust and evidence-based practice as their guiding principles. A structured methodology that includes clear and well-established principles, testing with validation, dissemination of information, and is accepting of controlled revision at all levels, is employed to provide a rigorous framework for mental health system reform. Thank you. Could you take that down, please? Now, the doctrine covers various further points. You referred before to the safety case, using safety cases, and in fact, does the report address in further details the safety case approach, and does it give a couple of worked examples of how it might work, including, if I've picked up on this rightly, do you draw on Richard's experience? For example, one of the safety cases relates to ward observation. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, I tried to stick as closely to what I had a reasonable and valid opinion of as I could.
Thank you. And you come on, you provide a conclusion, you provide 2 annexes, including a generic safety case structure. Robert, I can assure you that the chair and the inquiry will be considering that in some detail and with great care. Is there anything else at this stage that you would like to draw our attention to arising from the doctrine?
Yeah, so I think it's linking it end to end, and at the end I'll start at the patient end of it with the safety cases. The safety cases are developing process and procedure that's deeply embedded into many high-risk industries, including the national health, where since our second son first introduced that as part of an afternoon with the Essex Mental Health Inquiry, and hopefully that material is available to you because he's far more of an expert on that than I am. Now, if you look at the idea that happens there is you now take, instead of having a thick monumental document over here that you can't find what you want, as you come to do a particular piece of work on a ward, on a mental health ward, so you effectively have a job card, if you like, and on that it tells you the objective of what you've got to do, the aim of what you've got to do, the objectives you're going to do, and how you're going to prove that you've made it safe for the patient.
So this is a practical approach.
This is the practical approach. Now, by doing it that way, you can put onto those elements of work all of the things across all of those different documents in one place, relevant at one time. They can now have their mind clear on what they're trying to achieve. When you've achieved that, you can now link all of those safety cases to make up a whole overall procedure of care for a particular patient. You can also manage your staff more effectively because within them you can state who's qualified to do it, what level of qualification they need, and you can map that to the individuals of whom you've proved can actually do those safety cases. And do they need supervision, oversight, or can they do it on their own? So you can build training programs, have staff come in, they can get used to using the safety cases, and the nurses now know that someone that they haven't met before has actually been approved to do a whole series of work. And the nurses, instead of worrying about every single detail, can use their professional skills to put all of that work together into a comprehensive pattern of care for the patients themselves.
And if I've understood correctly, the purpose of this document is effectively to start a discussion, starting point being that there needs to be fundamental change.
Yeah. The word proposal at the beginning gets your attention. The fact that I used the word hypothesis a little bit below it probably is a bit more honest.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move on now. We've come to the end of the questions that I have for you. Mm-hmm. The situation is this, Robert. In a moment, we'll put up a photo of Richard and the family. Before I do, I just want to make sure that we've covered all of the key points that you feel should be covered in your evidence today.
I think so. It's difficult to think of anything else after that.
So this is the process. We'll put up the photograph, and I've seen it. It's a lovely photograph of the family.
Yes.
That may well be the end of your evidence, but we will just break to check whether there are further questions that need to be asked.
Okay.
If there are no further questions, then you don't need to come back.
I was informed of one question that I might
We've covered
receive.
that, yes. Could we then put up the photograph, please, Amanda? This was clearly at one of his graduations.
That was his PhD.
And that looks like a very happy occasion.
It was a lovely day.
Not bad.
Thank you very much. So, Chair, do you have any questions?
I have no questions. I just want to thank you very much indeed. We've worked you very hard this afternoon, but I'm very, very grateful for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And to your wife too.
Thank you.